Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Let's start with the day before Thanksgiving. Where I live in Pennsylvania, the Senate Republicans decided that they were going to have this grand conspiracy hearing. They rented a hotel ballroom in Gettysburg, PA, had all of the Trump faithful come out, maskless, of course. They got the Trump clown car to send Rudy and Attorney Ellis, and brought in a bunch of people from across the state who had imaginary, images of fraud and massive fraud. I mean, enormous conspiratorial kind of fraud. And they brought them all together for one giant performance, not under oath, of course. So it wasn't actually a hearing, because a hearing is under oath. So that what you say, what you testify during the hearing, you can actually be charged with perjury if you lie. Which is why they didn't put anyone under oath. Which is why it was okay for Donald Trump to phone it in. Literally phone it in. They literally had Donald Trump call into the cell phone. They held the cell phone up to the microphone so Trump could ramble on for like 20 minutes about how there was all this fraud and how it was all bad and how it was all stolen. And at the time, I was saying, look, this is a giant super spreader event. This is ridiculous. This is stupid. But this is what Republicans do. This is them saying, we're going to be defiant in the face of the global pandemic that is hammering down on the country at this moment. We'll show you. And the guy who was really the ringleader of this, Senator Doug Mastriano, who wants to be governor. That's 2022. He is going to run for governor. Everybody knows that. This was kind of his coming out party. This was kind of his, I'm now at the front of the crazy pack. Put me at the head of the crazy train because I'm here. Only problem was, after the super spreader event, after the temper tantrum tour had dispersed and all of the angry people, because look, they were in there just fuming at the mouth. There weren't people who were speaking. They were screaming. They were really all riled up. And for sadly, no reason. I mean, the truth of the matter is the things that they were throwing out, I don't know how you cobble it together in a conspiracy theory, but they figured it out, and good on them, because hey, understand what that little kangaroo court really was about. It was about, keeping people like that all bunched up, all angry, all bunched up in the panties. And it was about raising money so that Mastriano can run for governor, and that the Republicans can cash in on the angry Trump faithful. And it was about list building. It was about building that anger and the army of people that you're going to need to run for governor. So this was Mastriano's moment. This was his moment, and he was defiantly maskless the entire time, along with the other senators who sat at the head of the tirade. And I was saying at the time, I go, this is a horrible criminal act. These people should be held accountable. So hours later, Doug Mastriano, the senator, state senator from Pennsylvania here, goes to the White House with his son and a friend of his son's. And at the White House, they actually test you for coronavirus because they don't want you walking around spreading it any more than it's already spread through the White House, because it's there. Turns out, Senator Doug test positive. Oh, oops. Hours after coming out of what is now a super spreader event. Nice job, Doug. And I was asking at the time when the hearing was going on, how many of these people are going to be dead in a couple of months? How many of these people who Trump and the Republicans have told, do your patriotic duty and fight this, stop the steal? How many are going to be dead because of it? Well, Mastriano now has come down with it. He is now infected with the virus. And I look at today's statement, and the reason I bring this up is today the insane statement, and Jake Corman is the interim Senate pro tempore. He is kind of the voice right now in this middle stage before the next session starts. He had what I think is probably one of the dumbest statements I've ever heard. He said, well, clearly, mistakes were made. Clearly mistakes were made. And that's life. We all make mistakes. And it's now our job to review it. And I'm going, no. That's not a mistake. You don't defiantly walk into a room full of people that you encourage to be there, all the while protesting the whole mask thing from the beginning. That is not a mistake. You made the choice. You not only made the choice, you encouraged others to defy logic and common sense and do something really stupid. And how many people, we don't know how many people have been infected out of this, but we do know the guy at the head of the table, the guy who brought it together, the ringleader, Senator Doug Mastriano, we know he's got it. And my favorite, and this is just priceless, my favorite part of all of this story is that evidently he did a Facebook Live event saying, hey, I've got it, and saying where he got it. You can't make this up. Evidently, before he did a TV interview, a woman came at him with brushes. So the woman with makeup brushes, the one who put makeup on his face, and he knew he shouldn't have done it. He knew he should have run from those brushes. He said, I knew right there, stop her. Don't let her put those brushes on your face. Just walk away. And I didn't. This is one of those moments where you want to use, a slight profanity word. He is so full of, his eyes are brown. I'm not buying that at all, but it is kind of interesting how he's going to blame a woman for one, and how two, that now has been deleted from his Facebook page. Oops. Oh, mistakes were made. And then this is the problem, because I think we have to hold the Doug Mastrianos of the world accountable. Every person who came out, every elected official who came out and said, oh, no, don't worry about those. No, don't worry about that. Every one of those who were in the freedom column of, we're going to fight Governor Wolf or any governor across this state or this country should be thrown out of office. Because right now, today, congratulations, America. We have shattered new records today. We have broken the record of the number of coronaviruses in one day. More than 200,000 cases today alone. And double bonus, more than 100,000 people in one day are hospitalized because of the virus. This was what the concern was all along. So to hear someone like Senator Jake Corman say, mistakes were made and we're going to review it. You know how we review it? We throw these bums out the next election. Remember these next couple of months. And remember, when this is all over on the other side of this, the people like Mastriano and Corman and Kim Ward and the rest of the PA state Republican senators who showed up to this super spreader event without any type of, we should do some social distancing. We should have sanitizer on. They didn't even try. I mean, it would have been one thing if they'd have, maybe put a bottle of Perel on the table. We tried. They just didn't do it. They didn't even try that. Pathetic. But here we are in this moment. Record breaking, and it's going to get worse from what I'm told. Experts who do this stuff for a living tell me the next couple of months are going to be horrible. By the time Joe Biden is sworn in as president, we could be losing 3,000 people each and every day. A 9/11 every single day. Let that sink in for a minute. And we're not hearing the kind of hair on fire stuff we heard back in March and April, where we need to shut things. Nobody's saying, nobody's talking like that. In fact, most of the news stories I've seen, we've moved on. The 2,000 people that died, well, unlucky. The numbers are scary. And while the CDC urged for Thanksgiving, please stay home, we had millions of people traveling all across the country. The CDC, once again, they're asking people for the Christmas holiday. We know it's going to be tough. We know that you want to visit your family. We know all this. Please don't. Please stay away from each other. Now, look, I understand, people have work they have to go to. You've got to go to grocery stores. You've got to do certain things. I get that. But at some point, doesn't common sense have to play into this? We used to, maybe I give us too much credit for the past, but I think back to my grandparents' generation. I think back to the people who were my parents' age, their generation. They were a little bit smarter. They were a little bit smarter, and that's how they lived longer. Sadly, this generation and the next are, well, not. But here we are in this moment. We're breaking records. Congratulations, America. We're number one. And we have a senator, a Republican senator, oddly enough, not just here in Pennsylvania, but in Washington, D.C., a senator from Kentucky, by the way, who is holding up any sanity, any help for the millions of families across this country who are struggling. Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer have said, hey, we're willing to come down even further. There's something like a $900 billion stimulus package that they're trying to put together before the end of the year. And Mitch McConnell, not so interested. Evidently put it forth and then, well, against it. Now, for me, this isn't nearly enough. And there's so much in there that has to be ripped out. The liability shield for employers, sorry, not going there. And if I can go back to the Pennsylvania State Senate for a second, every one of those employers, the senators whose people get sick should be personally sued. They should be personally liable for any of their employees who get sick because they did this. And this is where Mitch McConnell held up any stimulus over the summer because he wanted that pound of flesh. He wanted immunity for employers so that if they provide unsafe workplaces, there's no accountability. OSHA didn't do anything. The federal government did nothing to protect workers. And Mitch McConnell wanted to take it even further. So they didn't even have to worry about what little teeth are in the dog at this moment. What do you think will happen if McConnell gets his way and they give immunity to all employers? Do you think that they're going to even make the attempt, much like Mastriano and the Republicans in the Senate did in Gettysburg, by not even putting out a bottle of Perel, not even putting out some wet wipes, and putting the chairs right next to each other? If you watch the video, there were hundreds of maskless people breathing and coughing and sneezing and snorting and snotting all over each other. Fortunately, Rudy Giuliani didn't wipe any snot on their faces, just on his own. I mean, this is one of those moments where they must be held accountable. So in this stimulus, in the next thing, there can be no immunity shield. People have to be held accountable. And if it means we start locking people up like Doug Mastriano for putting us in these situations, maybe that's what we have to do. It's infuriating. And oh, by the way, out of that little kangaroo court they had, the little tantrum tour that Rudy drove the clown car into Gettysburg, PA over, I've had numerous people reach out to me and say, we need martial law. We need a re-election. We need to, we need to get our guns into the streets. I've heard some really crazy stuff. And in fact, so crazy that you've got the guy from Georgia who is the voting implementation manager, a guy named Gabriel Sterling, a Republican, who has said it's all gone too far, all of it. Mr. President, you have not condemned these actions or this language. Senators, you have not condemned this language or these actions. This has to stop. We need you to step up, and if you're going to take a position of leadership, show some. Step in, tell your supporters, don't be violent. Don't intimidate. All that's wrong. It's un-American. This guy's a Republican who the Republicans are going after. Can you imagine what Kathy Boockvar here in Pennsylvania is going through? Can you imagine what the Democrats in Pennsylvania are going through? This is a Republican saying he's getting death threats because the Trump faithful, well, they feel they've been cheated, and their dear leader has told them they've been cheated, yet they've presented no evidence. There's nothing there other than, well, wild claims. And as I said from the beginning, I don't believe any of this. I don't believe Trump believes any of this. This was his plan in 2016. If you remember going back to the election, he was already laying the groundwork for they're stealing it from me. And he was already laying the groundwork of setting up the super PAC that was going to be able to cash in a huge way. To me, this is a giant con. And our con and president is cashing in mightily. Somewhere to the tune of, well, I think the Washington Post said 150 million. The New York Times said 170 million. That hardworking people are sending to them because they've been duped. It's a giant con, folks. It's all been a giant con. And they're whipping up the faithful. And then while they're whipping them all up into a frenzy, they're passing the collection plate. Why? So they can cash in. It's sadly that simple. But in the process, what they're doing is they're destroying our democratic process. They're destroying our country. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Gonna take a quick break. Right back with Greg Palast. Stick around.
There's nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1859. That was the day John Brown was hanged in Charlestown, Virginia, in what is now West Virginia. He had been sentenced to death on charges of treason, murder, and insurrection for his role in the raid on the United States Federal Armory at Harper's Ferry. Brown and 21 abolitionists intended to seize the arsenal there, then build a free settlement in the Appalachian Mountains. From there, abolitionists and free people of color would wage a guerrilla war against the slave labor system throughout the South. Convicted on November 2nd, Brown resisted plans for rescue and prepared to die a martyr. And on this day, John Brown wrote his last statement. I, John Brown, am now quite certain that the crimes of this guilty land will never be purged away but with blood. I had, as I now think, vainly flattered myself that without very much bloodshed, it might be done. He was marched out of the Jefferson County Jail through a crowd of onlookers that included Stonewall Jackson and John Wilkes Booth to the gallows where he was hanged. While many abolitionists distanced themselves from his actions, they defended him and memorialized him after his death. Frederick Douglass remarked many years later, "His zeal in the cause of my race was far greater than mine. It was as the burning sun to my taper light. Mine was bounded by time. His stretched away to the boundless shores of eternity. I could live for the slave, but he could die for him."
Oh, John Brown's body lies molding in the grave, while weep the sons of bondage whom he ventured out to save. And though he lost his life in his struggle to free the slaves, his truth is marching on.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
John Brown's body lies molding in the grave.
Well, back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the headline at Newsweek today, Georgia hit with another voter lawsuit, and it's not from Trump. And you go, yeah, it's not from Trump, and it's the right one. And they point out that, while Trump has had his little tantrum tour, and you've had Rudy and Sidney Powell and the rest of the clown car with all of these wild accusations, there's no actual proof of that. What they point out is there's actual proof of voter suppression. And our friend Greg Palast and the Palast Investigation Fund came up with an investigation, and they've come up with nearly 200,000 voters in the state of Georgia that were just, I don't know, chucked off the list. All because, who knows? Just because we didn't like them, I guess. And here to share some thoughts on, how that happened, why it happened, and what this lawsuit is about, I've asked our good friend Greg Palast to come talk with us, investigative journalist, also the author of numerous incredible books, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, Billionaires and Ballot Bandits, Vultures Picnic, Armed Madhouse, and my favorite, How Trump Stole 2020. Greg, thanks for taking time for us.
Okay, well, one thing about that title, How Trump Stole 2020, is that it was a warning, not a prediction, and it came a little bit close, didn't it? Plus, now they're trying to steal the U.S. Senate in Georgia. And so, yes, I did an investigation, and it was put out by the ACLU, and saying that 198,351 voters were removed from the voter rolls illegally. And guess who? It was, voters of color, young people, 198,351. We have their names, addresses. We gave them to the Republican Secretary of State and said, you've wrongly blocked these voters from voting. And his response was, Greg Palast, he's a known Stacey Abrams shill. Okay, I've been called worse.
You could get worse.
I'm a Stacey Abrams shill. I said, yeah, whatever I am.
But it doesn't make you wrong.
Greg Palast. It's you removing 200,000 voters. And I wonder if this will, let's see if I can make this show up for a second. That's me, actually, there in Georgia with Martin Luther King's 92-year-old cousin. I'm in the house that they said she moved out of. I was at the polling station when they threw her 92-year-old behind out of the polling station, voting the same place 50 years. The Secretary of State said that she had left Atlanta. And that's the house. There's a picture. She showed me a picture of Martin Luther King having dinner with her at that house. So she's been there 60 years. This is the kind of stuff. I want you to see the victims. It's not just 198,000. That's a number. That's a person. Okay. And they're always, and too many of these persons that are on that list, their only crime, the only reason they got thrown off the voter rolls is that they were guilty of voting while black. So today, there was a lawsuit filed. They're under the law, they're allowed 90 days. 91 days since the ACLU told them, you've got this wrong, you're stopping these voters. They thought, we got 90 days ago past the general election. Well, they still couldn't steal it from Biden on the presidential. But now they're in this life or death race. 2 Senate candidates, U.S. Senate candidates, Senate seats up. And for the first time in American history, 2 Senate candidacies in a runoff, which will determine which party controls the U.S. Senate. Democrats win those seats. It's the Democrats. Republicans keep those seats. Mitch McConnell is your new overlord.
Is still your overlord and obstacle in chief. But so we know who these nearly 200,000 people are. So the organizing to get them out to vote, and I would argue that the incentive for them to vote, I gotta think, is really, really high. No.
Yeah, well, that's the whole thing. It's the turnout in Georgia was, I think, one of the highest in the nation. I mean, people crawl to the polls. Of both parties, I have to say. It's really a blood battle there. And so when you remove 198,000 voters, that's a pretty heavy thumb on the scale. So we had Black Voters Matter has sued. The group called the Transformative Justice Coalition, led by law professor Barbara Arnwine. She's the top legal scholar on vote suppression in America. And we had Rainbow Push. Reverend Jackson he's kind of ill, so he couldn't make the press conference. But the chairwoman of Rainbow Push was there with us, saying, look, we need to get an injunction from a federal court right now. Put these voters back. They can do it literally with a press of a button. They can do it in 24 hours. And by the way, anyone listening from Georgia, or if you know anyone from Georgia, please tell them you can register or re-register right now until and through December 7th. So D-Day is the last day to register, December 7th. And the reason we did this, we brought the suit on the 91st day, the first day we could file a suit. But just as important, we are publicizing the fact that you should check your registration. Don't be like Mrs. Jordan, Martin Luther King's cousin, who had no reason to check her registration after 50 years voting the same place. But you should check your registration because you could be purged. You can re-register. And how do you find out? Go to SaveMyVote2020.org. SaveMyVote2020.org. Or you go to gregpalace.com, and there you can see, by the way, our new PSAs that the Leonardo DiCaprio released today with Rosario Dawson and Zoe Saldana. You'll like the Zoe Saldana as long as you can speak Puerto Rican Spanish.
Right.
Or in Kenya.
Yeah, but now, I'm looking at this, and I'm my mind is now spinning the possibilities of nearly 200,000 voters who were cheated out of their vote, had their vote stolen in November, now having the opportunity to go forward. This is actually could change this race, no?
Yes, it could. And that's why they are in full-blown panic, and they got to call me Stacey Abrams shill, whatever they want to call me. I don't care. They're also threatening this guy Brad Raffin's Perger, and that's really his name, Raffin's Perger, who is a Secretary of State. Some Democrats have decided he's some kind of hero because he did cave into Donald Trump and failed to certify the election. He couldn't, believe me. He stole as many votes as he could. He knocked off the 200,000 people. You had long lines in Atlanta, only in black communities, places like Atlanta and Savannah. People couldn't get their mail-in ballots on time. I just got a report from a couple that got their mail-in ballots on November 4. Excuse me, it's a little late. Another guy who's mailed his in 10 days before the election. It was marked as received too late. The game's being played there. And by the way, the latest one, you'll love this, Rick. We caught him last Sunday. I have a team of 7 down there. I'll be joining him soon as I get the right equipment to protect my old behind. They said if you don't, are you ready? If you don't have a car registered in Georgia, they can challenge your voter registration. No car, no vote. Think about that a minute.
How?
Okay, now here's what they're saying. Now, obviously, they can't make you buy a car to vote in Georgia. That'd be the most expensive poll tax in American history. What they can do, what they said they could do, is if you don't have a car registered, then they can suspect that you aren't really living in Georgia. Well, believe it or not, there's a lot of people who are citizens of Georgia who don't have cars. They're called poor people who don't own cars. They're called students. I know of one Georgia citizen who tried to register to vote, and they gave her a hassle over just this matter. My daughter, who was a resident of Savannah. But she fought it. Now, here's what they can do. They'll say, you don't have a car, so you might not be a resident of Georgia. So don't worry. We're not going to stop you from registering to vote, but we will make you first go to a hearing. Now, it's COVID. It's January 5 is the election. So you get your, sometime in 2021, you get some hearing to prove that you are a Georgia resident. In the meantime, they've reelected Mitch McConnell. That's what I'm worried about. So we exposed it. They're beginning to back off. But these,
yeah, just when you think you've heard it all, just when you go every scheme under the sun, you've now heard everyone. This is probably the most far out one that I've heard. That you actually have to own a car. I mean, it's not even the driver's license thing now. Then is it?
No, it doesn't matter if you have a driver's license. That don't count. If you don't have a car registered and have paid the Georgia tax on it. Now, again, they can't say you have to buy a car or register a car to vote. They just say if you don't have a car, well, it means maybe you don't live here. And by the way, I asked them, okay, they snuck this through Sunday at 3 p.m. To an emergency meeting of the elections board. The next morning, they had at 8 a.m. a meeting, but we caught them. So did the NAACP. And we went in, and the NAA said, hey, wait a minute. You're knocking out poor people. You're knocking out students, and also we have a lot of seniors in the seniors' homes in Atlanta. They don't have cars anymore. They are resident. You know who you're knocking out. Who has cars? Suburban voters. They call them Republicans. All right. So here's what's going on. That's just one of the many gimmicks. Now, again, they can't make you buy the car. They can just hold you up. But it just shows you the lengths that they will go, and they sneak it in. People say, oh, we didn't read that in the paper. Of course you didn't, because they didn't issue a press release. They didn't, it was all done where no one was supposed to know about it, literally on a Sunday afternoon, putting in this rule.
That's not even a thief in the night. You're just doing that. Wow. I guess on a certain level, you have to give them credit for being, somewhat creative in the theft. All the while, you've got Donald Trump running around the country with his clown car with Giuliani and Powell in it, claiming there's all of this voter fraud going on when they're actively, right out in public doing this stuff. I guess, you kind of have to, on some level, give them credit.
Well, I mean, look, they are going to fight. I don't mind them fighting for every vote, but they're fighting to stop every one of your votes. We do have the problem, of course, that the Democratic Party has its ears close to stuff. They're just not dealing, but that's okay. That's, you save your own vote, and these voting rights organizations aren't waiting for any political party. So, but one of the things I'm very, very worried about when people are saying, yes, it's true, Donald Trump can't point to a single instance of voter fraud. In fact, we asked my team down there, went to that 8 a.m. Monday morning meeting. We were on at Zoom. I was on it too. I had to use obviously a masked name because they won't, I'm the Stacey Abrams shill, so they won't call him Greg Palast. So my assistant Terry Manperl asked, has anyone, even one single would-be voter, registered illegally from out of state? Even one. Can you point to one case? They couldn't point to one case. Now, last time I hit them, they said that there were 1,000. This same guy who now admits that there are zero fraudulent votes. That's why Trump's mad at him. He couldn't produce a fraudulent voter. But I got to tell you, before the election, he said he found 1,000 fraudulent voters. That's why they can put up with these rules. 1,000 fraudulent voters. I said, so can you name one? No. Did you arrest one? It's a felony crime to vote illegally. No. We just say 1,000 voters. And it was all over the national news.
Yeah.
This is one of the problems we run into. They make up these claims of voter fraud when it's the voters who are being defrauded by these officials.
Right, but you're talking about 1,000 voters. How do you get to purging over almost 200,000 of them then? I mean, if there are 1,000, what's the remedy? Is to throw 200,000 people off and steal the vote of 200,000 people? That's the answer?
Well, that's their excuse. But I have to say, once again, while they said there's 1,000 illegal voters, so we have to pull off 200,000 to make sure that no more people commit fraud, actually the 1,000 was a phony. Again, not one name was produced in the end, not one person arrested, not one person identified. He pulled it out of his orifice just to steal the headlines and pleasure Trump, but then he couldn't produce it because Trump's saying, well, show me these 1,000 voters, and Trump didn't get it. We made it up for you, Agent Orange. We never had 1,000 voters. We made that up to make you happy and to come up with these crazy rules to stop black people and young people from voting, and you don't get it. There are no fraudulent voters. You go to can for 5 years. In fact, in my book, How Trump Stole 2020, I did a calculation based on the figures from a Rutgers study, that the chance that you will be hit and killed by lightning is 540% more likely than that you will cast a fraudulent vote. It's not like it never happens, but it's less often than being struck by lightning.
Yeah.
It is insane. It's dangerous. It's Jim Crow in a new form.
In fact, the two cases that they have found in Pennsylvania were both, one guy voted for Republican, voted for his, I think it was his dead mother, and another one voted for his son, who was going to vote for Joe Biden. He stole the kid's mail-in ballot and he mailed it in. Those are the two frauds that we've actually found, both done by Republicans, which I find very interesting. So as this suit goes forward, what are we expecting in the coming days? And do you expect those 200,000 people, nearly 200,000 people, to get their access to the vote back with the flip of the switch, or are they going to have to all be re-registered?
The very top voting rights lawyers in the country are on this case. It's quite amazing. It's become the national case, and they believe that the case is very strong for an immediate injunction. Say within a week, we are hoping to get these voters back on the voter rolls. At least our goal is by December 14th when early voting starts. So we're hoping that in the next 2 weeks, the courts will simply act and say, you violate the law. You know, they literally use the wrong list. The law says if you're going to remove people from voting, you got to ask the post office if people have moved. The post office, we hired the post office. You can do that. We hired the post office. Said, these people didn't move. We're still delivering the mail. We have proof. Here's their names. We're delivering the mail at their houses. What are you talking about? And so they literally violated federal law. We hope to win on this. But the other thing is your program, our billboards, we're going to have literally giant electronic billboards. Black Voters Matter has sent out 98,000 postcards saying, wow, you lost your vote. Re-register right now. So we have probably returned, I would say, 20,000 of the voters to the voter rolls already, simply by notifying them, letting them know you have lost your vote, re-register, always check. And so we're hoping that action will get enough people back on the rolls on their own. And of course, it would be nice if the Secretary of State would say, okay, you got me, I'll put him back on. I'm not holding my breath. Are you, Rick?
No, not at all. But I can't imagine what it's like to go to the polling place ready to vote and be told, sorry, there's the door.
After 4 hours of waiting in line.
Right.
Like that?
During a global pandemic. You'd have to arrest me, I think.
That's one of the things. People get angry. They get upset. This 92-year-old woman's granddaughter who is there, she's in our film in the public service piece we did with Rosario Dawson. Hysterical.
No, it's
How
crazy.
could they do this to her without an explanation?
It's absolutely crazy. And something we've got to absolutely fight against. Greg, I appreciate the time. Keep up the great work. As this continues, we'd love to have you back and keep us up to date with what's going on.
Well, and follow me at gregpalast.com. We'll be having more investigative reports coming out this week.
Outstanding. Good stuff, Greg. Thanks so much. And we'll make sure we get links out at thericksmithshow.com of how folks can check out what Greg's doing. Thanks so much. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2001. That was the day that energy trading giant Enron filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It was the biggest bankruptcy in U.S. history up to that time. At its peak, the Houston-based Enron was the 7th largest company in the country. A combination of mismanagement and all-out greed sank Enron. The company used numerous accounting tricks and loopholes to hide billions of dollars of debt from its shareholders. In August of 2000, shares of the company were worth $90.75. But by November 30th, 2001, they had plummeted to just 26 cents. After filing bankruptcy, thousands of Enron employees were left to go down with the ship. Many employees and retirees had thousands of dollars worth of Enron stock. Employees were told the company would recover. They were encouraged not to sell off their stock and even to buy more, while at the same time, top executives were dumping their stock holdings. When the company went under, the employees' retirement accounts were wiped out. Some who had already retired had to re-enter the workforce. The following January, a New York Times report shared the stories of some of the 4,000 employees laid off in the immediate aftermath of the bankruptcy. One was told he lost his job by voicemail. Another was told he had 30 minutes to clear out his desk. Multiple lawsuits won a portion of the money back for Enron stockholders. But the employees lost more than $2 billion in retirement funds. In the end, more than 20 top executives were found guilty for the crimes they committed while running the company. Enron became synonymous with the corporate greed that has been the hallmark of 21st century America. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as I said, we've broken records for the number of coronavirus cases in a day to over 200,000. The number of people hospitalized over 100,000. And look, we're doing right now what the fear months ago was. We're overtaxing our healthcare workers. We're putting them in a position where they're overworked, underappreciated, understaffed, and, well, you still have the same pressures to get as much out of them and pay them as little as possible as you've ever had. And we're seeing across the country, nurses are saying, we've had enough, which is why I found out in Nevada, there were workers at the Sunrise Hospital who took advantage of Walkout Wednesday to raise awareness of the fact that, the situation in these hospitals are getting worse. And these workers, these nurses, these healthcare providers want people to know what's going on and also want hospitals to do better. And here to share some thoughts on what they did today on Walkout Wednesday, I've asked Erica Watanabe to come talk with us. She is a HCA certified surgical tech. Erica, thanks for taking time for us.
Hi, thank you for having me on.
So today you guys walked out. The way it makes it sound, Walkout Wednesday, everybody just left the hospital. This was either on your breaks or before or after your shift, correct?
Yes, correct. We would never walk out on our patients from the beginning of this pandemic. We have never walked out on our patients, even though HCA has not provided us with the proper PPE or in the beginning of the proper testing or the proper hazard pay. We have shown up to work every day during this pandemic to take care of our patients.
Because, I'm reading the response from the CEO of the Sunrise Hospital and Medical Center and Sunrise Children's Hospital, a guy named Todd Sklamberg, I guess is his name. And the way he makes it sound is you guys are abandoning all your patients and taking advantage of the virus for your own financial gain, and how despicable you are, because they're evidently, according to him, providing you with everything you could possibly ever want in the safest of possible workplaces, and you're just ungrateful.
Right. So we all were off of the clock. So we all were either on our breaks before our shifts or after our long shifts. 8, 10, or 12-hour shifts of taking care of the sickest patients. We were then out there standing up to make the public aware of our working conditions on our own time. I myself have never received an N95 mask from HCA and have taken care of COVID patients.
Wow.
We share the things called PAPRs, which you see on TV with the hood and the tube coming out of the top to the filter and back. HCA has us sharing them. So I might use it up on the COVID floor. I take it, I wipe it with a wipe, put it in a disinfectant wipe. I put it in a bag, in a bin, and then you'll come behind me and use that same one. Are you comfortable with that?
No, I'm not even comfortable hearing that.
But these are the choices that we make. I mean, I love my job. I've done this since I was 18. I did this for the United States Army. I did this in a field hospital, and I'm doing this here, and I've never seen conditions like this. And I understand it's a pandemic, but, I mean, it's like the amount of money that HCA has, and you're not going to give us an N95 mask. You're going to have us reuse these PAPRs. Reusing gowns up on some of the floors of the HCA facilities is what I've heard from other employees. We are in bargaining for our union, our SCIU union. We're in negotiations. They offered us 1.25% for a raise for us.
That's insane.
And with a straight face, they offered us that. And then they want to have us pay more for our benefits. So that's what they're offering at the table, along with some other things.
Along with not providing you with the things that you need. And I'm looking at the CEO's statement. He said that it's, since day one, he says, the hospital has, provided plenty of supplies, is what he has said. We've had plenty of supplies on hand that are easily accessible to our caregivers and continue to have the supplies needed to keep our staff and patients safe. He said, we have a PPE depot at distribution of supplies 24/7 and a steward who ensures our team has the equipment they need. He says they followed all CDC requirements and guidelines regarding PPE. From what I'm hearing from you, though, that's a bold-faced lie. I mean, that is an out-and-out lie.
Well, they do have a depot for PPE. It's level 1 to level 3 masks, which are level 1 masks are very thin. Like every day, like Walgreens will sell a level 1 mask.
Right, the ones I've got in my car. I bought them from Home Depot.
Correct. And a level 3 mask is the one that I use in surgery, but it's not an N95. And a KN95 is not an N95.
Right. That's a cheap Chinese knockoff.
That's like the Kmart N95. Remember when we were kids and you'd go to Kmart and you'd get, the fake Reeboks.
Right.
It's kind of the same thing. So there is a depot, but you go to that depot and you get the reused PAPR hood, or you get the level 1 to level 3 mask. So there is a depot, but that's what's there. It's not the proper PPE for us to take care of our patients.
Or yourself. Look, I mean, patients aside, the number one person you've got to take care of is yourself, because you can't help them if you're sick. So
Correct.
Taking care of you should be job one, so that you can then go and do all those other things that need to be done. Because again, we're a stupid country who does stupid things, and now we're over 100,000 people in the hospital because of this virus, and hammering folks like you while simultaneously not getting you the things that you need and making you reuse stuff. I mean, I'm waiting for the day to start seeing nurses wearing garbage bags again.
Yeah, I mean, it really makes me sad that the numbers have gotten this high again. But we have gone to work every day. Myself and my coworkers have gone to work every day since this pandemic, because this is what we do. I mean, we take care of people. This is our job. I love what I do, but
Right.
This is getting a little ridiculous on the HCA side versus the SCIU side. And it's like, look, we just need to come to the table here and work this out and be done with this.
Yeah, but ultimately, I think there was a quote that you were quoted in a couple of newspapers, and I think it's the perfect quote, to be honest. In fact, it's a frame that I've used, for years. Whenever we talk about heroes, you say that if we're going to call us heroes in public, then treat us like heroes in private. And this, for me, is spot on accurate. If we're going to put you up on a pedestal and say how wonderful you are, how essential you are, then we should treat you like that. We should pay you the pay that you deserve, hazard pay on top of that, and get you the things you need. That just seems like, again, if you're going to put you up on this pedestal, make it something worthy. It's crazy to me.
And I hear that same thing from normal everyday people, but I don't understand what the disconnect is with the higher up executives. I don't understand. When we would walk in, and at one time they had "Heroes Work Here" painted on the window, and I can't, I'm reusing a PAPR or a gown. You know what I mean? It's just kind of, I don't know, and
they
that's
spend a
why
lot of money on PR, don't they?
Yeah, and that's why we were doing the quote unquote walkout Wednesdays, to just bring this to the public's attention. And we were getting lots of horn honks, lots of waving, and just on our own time to come out and, just some solidarity and to just, bring everybody together and bring this up to the community.
Yeah. And for me, the other part of it is the awareness of what you guys are going through. I've been reading a lot of stories on Twitter of nurses and doctors who have come forth and said, look, these are the conditions that we're seeing. We're becoming overrun. We're becoming overwhelmed. Please, stop doing dumb things.
Yeah.
And look, I'm sure you see some horrible things. I'm sure, in your daily work, you see some terrible things that, you've got to deal with yourself and your family too. And it's got to be taxing on you and your coworkers, what's going on.
Yeah, we're a very close group, and this definitely has brought us closer. I mean, like I said, I'm a veteran, so it kind of is the same thing as being deployed with a group. You kind of have that same camaraderie.
Right.
Look, we've gone through this together. Look where we've come, and I'm here for you. And I got this. And I got you. And turn around. Let me make sure your gown is done up okay. Okay, let me wipe this off for you. Let me get this. And that's where we're at. Because HCA's executives aren't going to do it for us, so I have your back. Come here, let me help you.
And that's you mentioned the word solidarity, which I think is a perfect word for what healthcare workers are coming together on. The kind of stories that I've heard from them, and when we talk to doctors or nurses, they all say the same thing. They've got each other's back. They're looking out for each other. Especially union nurses, and they really do look out for each other. But one of my great fears is that as we work through this, and it's going to get uglier before it gets any better, that we end up losing people like you who just say, you know what, enough of this. I can't do this anymore. I can't have CEOs who are going to constantly try and do things on the cheap and cheat me out of wages, conditions, all that stuff, and be overworked and understaffed. I fear we lose a lot of people. Do you have the same kind of sentiment?
I do have a fear of that, and that's when the camaraderie and the solidarity, we help bring each other up. So if somebody's having a rough day, we make sure that, you sit and talk to that person, and, hey, how's it going? How are you today? Or if you don't see somebody at work for a day, we reach out to each other. We reach out to our brothers and sisters and text them and call them. Hey, how you doing? How's it going? What do you need? You need something? Can I, do something for you? Can I drop something off at your house and leave it at the door? How are you feeling? Are you feeling okay? That kind of stuff. We watch out for somebody. Hey, did you see so-and-so? Did she look okay today? Definitely.
Yeah. No, it's so important, and you hear this same story over and over. No matter if it's in Nevada where you are, or Pennsylvania where I'm at, or New York, or Connecticut, or wherever, it's the same story replicated over and over. Where you have this, this corporate system that seems to want to, steal and cheat you out of every dime they can get out of you, all the while. While putting you in really untenable situations like this. Because as I read the story, the way that the CEO seemed to frame it is you guys were abandoning your patients. And I've seen this, played out at nursing homes and all the stuff. That's the first message you're supposed to get is, well, these they don't really care about their patients. They only care about themselves, which is why right at the beginning I emphasized the fact that you guys were doing this on your breaks and before and after work, because that's important.
Right. One of the ER nurses that was there with us this morning, and I know for you guys in Pennsylvania, it might not seem as cold, but I think it was in the 50s this morning when we were out there. So we were freezing. We were really cold this morning at 6 a.m. when we were out there. So that's cold for us in Vegas. But she had worked 11 days straight in the ER, and she came out early before her, I believe it was 12th day, working to stand with us in solidarity for 30 minutes before she went back in for another shift.
Yeah, that's difficult. I mean, I've done that, but I've worked in the freight industry. It's just throwing boxes or driving a truck. I can't imagine being in that situation with people's lives in your hands, and the kind of fatigue, physical fatigue and mental fatigue that you've got to be fighting. That just doesn't seem healthy for the individual doing it, or good for the patients who have these folks who are in front of them. I just, that is the worst of all scenarios in my view.
Well, and we appreciate this platform to be able to speak to the public and people like you who do understand, and we feel as though you guys have our back too, but SCIU has definitely been there for us and has helped us have a voice in this fight since the beginning of the pandemic. And they've, and this Walkout Wednesday was a nice turnout, but it was a small portion of us representing all the other employees that are still working in those HCA hospitals that we have here in Las Vegas that still had to work and could not make it out to us. And that's really what kept us going while we were cold here in Las Vegas. And then later this afternoon is that we also were representing our other brothers and sisters that couldn't get out there.
Well, good on you and good on the work that you're doing. And I hope you keep it up. I hope this ends. I hope the CEO and the company comes around and treats you like the heroes that you are, that all of us know you are. I appreciate you taking some time. And as this continues, I'd love you to stay in touch with us so that we can keep up on it.
Sure thing. Thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you so much, Erica. Erica Watanabe, HCA certified surgical tech. This is what we've been talking about for a while. This kind of, we call people heroes. We put them up on platforms. And maybe it's just a construct of putting someone up on a platform so that you either knock them off or tear them down. But we don't seem to treat them well. And, I'm listening to that, an ER nurse coming in 11 days in a row, working 10, 12 hours every day. Would you want the person taking care of you to be that fatigued, to be that tired, that worn out? Is that healthy? Is that safe? I mean, if you're the bean counter who's running these hospitals, if you're the person trying to squeeze every nickel, squeeze every quarter to where the eagle screams, would you want to be the person being worked on in your hour of need? Or do you want that medical professional in front of you rested, mentally and physically completely in tune with what they're doing? It's scary times because, the thing that I find most impressive about these healthcare workers is they don't really want to be called heroes. Erica didn't seem to take, compliments very easily. Didn't seem to take the hey, thank you for what you do, and how amazing it is that you do this stuff under these conditions. It's just a matter of what they do and who they are. So I say, maybe we start pressuring these hospitals to do better, and these CEOs, and when they throw out things like this guy tried, this is just they're just trying to squeeze us, during a contract negotiation, making you think that they walked out on their patients. We throw it back at them because I've yet to find that's actually happened. Heard a lot of people try and claim it has, but I've never found one where it has actually happened. I'd love to hear your thoughts, especially if you're a healthcare worker. I'd love to hear your thoughts in this moment of our pandemic. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2009. That was the day that Walmart agreed to pay $40 million to over 87,000 current and former employees in Massachusetts. This was the largest class action settlement in the state's history. The lawsuit, filed in 2001, accused the retail giant of denying workers rest and meal breaks. The company also allegedly refused to pay overtime, manipulated time cards, and required workers to work off the clock for free. In other words, Walmart was accused of wide-scale wage theft. The retail giant decided to settle the case rather than take it to trial. That was not too surprising, since the company had already settled 63 similar federal and state class action wage and hour lawsuits. The total tally Walmart paid out due to wage theft was a whopping $900 million. Under the terms of the Massachusetts agreement, any person who worked for Walmart from August 1995 to the settlement date received a payment between $400 and $2,500. The company was also required to put measures in place to ensure that wage theft stopped. This included a hotline that workers could call anonymously if they were made to skip meal breaks. Walmart also agreed to use a clock-out, lockout program that prevents workers from using store cash registers if they are not actually clocked in for work. In an affidavit filed with the settlement, the lead counsel for the employees said the accord dwarfs settlements of similar class actions against Walmart across the country. Not surprisingly, the company has strenuously resisted all efforts by its store employees to join and form unions. Wage theft, not getting paid for all of the hours you actually work, continues to be a major complaint of low-wage workers and is an important issue for today's labor movement. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
There's a mournful Peggy Lee song that asks the existential question, is that all there is? Some progressives are asking that when looking at whether to vote this year, Biden or Trump. Is that all there is? No, just scroll down the ballot in most voting districts and you'll find a choice of solid progressive contenders in congressional, state, and local races for grassroots offices. But wait, scroll a bit lower and you're likely to discover a process of direct democracy, allowing ordinary people, you and me, to make our own policies and laws rather than hoping that legislators and lobbyists will do right by us. These are ballot initiatives, policy ideas and procedural changes that are put directly to voters in a state, county, or city. Most are put on the ballot by groups that get enough voters to sign petitions demanding that a particular proposal be listed. It's not an easy process, but it has become a more common legislative tool, as shown by the number and variety of propositions on Tuesday's ballots. Just counting statewide initiatives, voters in 32 states will be making their will known on 120 ideas. They include such solidly progressive actions as Arizona's proposal to raise taxes slightly on the super-rich to cover an overdue raise in pay for school teachers. They also include such blatantly regressive schemes as the attempt in California by Uber, Lyft, and other gig giants to strip health care from their low-wage workers. This is Jim Hightower saying, especially prominent in this year of pandemic disease, mass job losses, and ever-spreading inequality, are citizen initiatives to start restoring worker rights and income. These illustrate the importance of direct ballot lawmaking. When public officials and corporate hierarchies snub people's needs or carelessly harm them, the initiative is a democratic path for asserting the people's will.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So we've all heard the corporate jargon that they use to try and pigeonhole our kids into, I still remember, George W. Bush, is our children learning? It still makes me laugh every time I think of that. But the words that they throw out about accountability and, data-driven, accountability and, pushing best practices to hold people accountable, so that we can, move forward with next-gen technology and create partnerships, and all that kind of stuff that makes you think, wow, they're really doing something. What they're actually doing is they're moving us towards the corporate thinking, using corporate speak to get us to buy into, maybe it would be better to privatize our local public schools. And here to talk about that is Nancy Bailey. Nancy Bailey is an education blogger, and she has written the piece on business terms being used to privatize our public schools to get us thinking in those buzzword terms. Nancy, thanks for taking time for us.
Hi, Rick. How are you?
So I'm good. So good piece. I hope people will take a look at it. We'll get it out on social media so people can. But you got a bunch of buzzwords in there that I've heard every educator use at one point or another.
Right. I think they've become just pretty ingrained in the schools and school systems. Talk and they started, I think, probably in the 1980s and 1990s, probably after a nation at risk when business started to become more involved in our schools. And I got this idea because the Phi Delta Kappan Journal for Teachers recently had the title School for Sale. And I think we've moved rapidly towards privatizing schools, unfortunately. And
with the pandemic, it's anyone's guess what's going to happen afterwards. I hope they'll come back. I know parents want schools back the way they were, I think, but there's a lot of transformation talk. And these words, I think, have really reshaped how we look at public education. We never used to talk about accountability. We used to just assume that our teachers were going to do a good job, and you'd have some that maybe didn't. But like in any profession, you'll have some that don't do the job the way they should, but most do. And you just kind of rely on schools to work. And with accountability now, it's tied in with standardized testing and test objectives. And so everybody's supposed to do the same thing, and that makes it very industrial-like when you stop and think about it.
Yep. No, I've said for years what's happened is they want to turn education into factory work, the art of teaching into factory work, where every kid that comes in front of them is a little vessel, and you fill knowledge into their heads and you stamp them out, just like a metal press. But the word accountability, has changed for me anyway, because when I was a kid, I went to school in the 70s and early 80s. The accountability was the student's job to learn. If I came home with a bad report card, my mother would literally beat me for not getting good grades. I was accountable. I was being held accountable. Didn't know what the word was yet, but that's where it was. I now hear people saying it's the teacher's fault that the kid didn't learn, whereas my mother said, you didn't learn, that's your fault. It's not the teacher's fault. And when did that change?
Well, I think probably in the 1980s when business started to get involved, and I think it's also a part of making schools look like they're failing. And in order to, people used to really like their public schools, and year after year, the more you get beat down, the more schools are beat down, people start not liking them, to where we are today, where, I've been reading some of the things, some of the news reports about kids in school or not in school, and there's just so many awful comments about ending public school. Why do we need public schools? We need choice. We've got the Betsy DeVos push for choice, and so this language has kind of led to that. Alignment, for example, getting kids to match everything they do to a test. And I think it's important to understand that we're moving away from general standardized testing to just nonstop online data collection of what children do and how they perform. And that data collection is in some ways going to replace the old kind of standardized testing. Everything will be online. Parents are very worried about this data collection and how it will profile their child for the future, and whether their child will be led into a certain track for a certain career or a certain, not, and also for their emotions. Social emotional learning is very big right now. There's a lot of data collection there too. So that alignment, getting kids to act a certain way, do a certain, do certain tasks, and all of that also leads towards computer instruction, because if everything's aligned, it works well online, and it just doesn't lend itself very much to creativity. And then you have benchmarks that they use instead of the term objectives, and benchmarks are often used with pay-for-success plans, where investors come in and invest in a plan and then get children to reach certain benchmarks that they've worked on, and then the corporation that has bankrolled a certain project gets to make a profit on that investment. So that term is, again, a very corporate term. Best practice, you mentioned before. Best practice, I think, quite often means that they're trying to sell a program to you.
Right. But wasn't that the basic the impetus of the whole charter movement at the beginning was they were going to try some new things and
Oh
whatever
yeah,
worked well they would then share with everyone else instead of what's actually happened is what works well they patent and then they sell back to us that we paid for the research and development and then they cash in on the curriculum, which is what we're seeing across the charter movement now. Instead of what was supposed to happen is that when we figured out how to do something a little bit better, we shared it among the group that everyone got to use it.
well, I think charters have also been, there's such a change from what they were supposed to be originally for teachers to run. You know, teachers were supposed to be the folks that started the charters, you know,
Right.
that would have the ideas. And I mean, I knew teachers who started alternative schools in the 80s, and they worked out fine. And charters were supposed to give you more freedom for that. I haven't really heard of a lot of innovations coming from charter schools. There are some good charter schools, but there are so many more that aren't held accountable and that are really, you know, kind of taking a lot of the funding that should be going to traditional public schools and not having it be used in a good purpose for the charter school.
Yeah, but
Some
here's
charter
the thing.
schools-
You just used one of the buzzwords. You just said they're not being held accountable.
Exactly. Well,
No, I mean because look,
that's-
at the end of the day, we do want some of that. But what I've seen from the charters and people that I've talked to over the years, it seems to be just kind of a money laundering scheme. Every kid's
Yeah.
worth about 10 grand, and they put it out in this curriculum that they all have to buy and all the standardized tests. It just seems like everything costs something as opposed to when I was a kid. And I guess this is showing how old I'm. I'm only 53. I don't think that's really old, but I had the teachers, they used to print off the tests with a mimeograph machine. They'd be in there cranking their behinds off and handing stuff out. You take the test, they'd have it for you back on Monday. Now
Right.
everything's fill in a bubble, and you'll get results in 6 months.
Right, and again, a lot of that is very much data driven. Also, collecting a lot of information on children, but it's very cold and impersonal, and you also have brands now. I keep getting advertisements. Market your school brand, and I mean I'm retired now, but I still see these advertisements for marketing schools. So it's like they're getting ready to have these privatized schools, and all these buzzwords are used for that purpose.
Yeah.
You have CEOs. You call superintendents now CEOs. When did that happen? CEOs are supposed to, be in, deal with corporations, with, selling a product. Children are products. They're children. So that's a strange term, I think, to use for a superintendent. And customers is one of my favorite examples, because parents and the community are supposed to have ownership of their schools. Since when do we call them customers? The word customers is obviously meant for someone who's going to have to purchase a tuition, or they're going to have to start paying for their schools.
Well, that's the future right there. You've hit that on the head.
Exactly, and I think all the choice talk gets everybody thinking they're going to get a little bit of money, but that amount of money isn't going to really fund a middle class or a child who's comes from a family who's struggling. They're not really going to be able to pay for a wealthy private school, so it's really going to separate the haves from the have-nots.
Yeah, even more so. My other favorite word is stakeholder. What happened if they were students? Now they're stakeholders.
Yes, and that's used quite commonly. It's almost used as much, I think, as accountability. And stakeholders, of course, in business it means, suppliers and investors. And in public schools, it's people who put their ideas into the school. They're going to fund something in a school that might not have enough funds, but then they also get a lot of say in how that school is run. So that's really a concern, I think.
Right.
And disruption is also, I think, a serious word right now, because in business, disruption is a word that's used to refer to, shaking things up a bit and renewal. But with school, I've never known disruption to really be a good thing. It's like the changes that have mattered to children that I've seen as a teacher have always been changes that involve teacher and parent buy-in, and also where you ease the change, you ease it into the curriculum, and children like consistency. They don't like a lot of drastic changes all at once. So I've never felt like disruption was a really good word to use with children.
Yeah, see, disruption was always a negative word for me because it was,
Yes.
when I was a kid, I was usually the one causing the disruption. Which at the time, because I went to a Catholic school in the early years, and that disruption usually came around with me getting beaten with a stick.
Oh, dear.
So, that's where I learned the word disruption.
Rick, I feel bad for you. You had some rough times growing up.
Oh, no, I have some nuns. There are some nuns where if I knew where they buried them, I would dig them up so I could kill them again.
Oh, no. Okay.
Well, if I ever needed a bodyguard, Notre Dame nuns, that's what I'm getting. Get them with that stick. So I guess the last line of questioning I've got for you, because we've talked about these terms, and I think the goal is eventually to privatize and move away from local control of public education and of public schools.
Yep.
But we're told this often, that that competition model that they throw out there, that this is a good thing because it's going to cause choice, is going to give us competition, and competition always comes up with the best outcomes. So the ideologues believe. But here's the thing: it doesn't seem like the public schools are able to compete. This seems like a boxing match where the public schools have both hands tied to their feet. Because they're not out there, marketing their brand. They're not out there putting ads on every radio and TV station and billboards. They're not out sending flyers going, hey, we can give you, whatever discount or whatever check to send your kids here. It seems like this is set up specifically to destroy public education, and there's nothing the public schools can do about it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, everybody can fight back, and I hope everybody has a lot of hope that President-elect Biden will try to do some changes and focus on some good things for schools. But yeah, it's there are just a lot of wealthy people that want a piece of the action when it comes to public education, and it's hard to fight that. It really is. And what's interesting about all these words is I found an article where some of these words are the most hated business buzzwords that business doesn't like, and yet here we are taking them and to use them for schools. But I'm very concerned about what's going to happen with public education. I don't think people realize what a great institution it is, and I think they've been sort of led to believe that privatization is something better. But I don't think it really is, and I think that the competition idea, we've got a lot of things that are marketed today that you would think would be doing, if they didn't do well, they would go out of business.
Right.
But they continue to be promoted, and they continue to make money, even though they're failing. I can think of certain computer programs. K-12 Incorporated is an online program that is just known to be awful, but it continues to thrive, and they continue to make money on it. So that idea of competition doesn't really fly when it comes, that they're going to go out of business if it doesn't work. That doesn't really fly when it comes to privatization of schools. So I'm really concerned and worried about my profession, teaching and public education in the future. I think it'll be a great loss to this country if we do lose schools, and I'm kind of keeping my fingers crossed that maybe Biden-Harris will make some better changes, and also that after COVID, people will appreciate when schools get back to the way they were, and that we could probably make them better. They certainly can be made better, but the whole community idea of owning your own schools and the idea of democratic institutions having democratic schooling, I think is very powerful. for democracy. So I hope that schools will come back stronger than before.
I hope so too. The democracy thing, a little bit above, I think, most people's concerns or wants. I think the local control, the ownership, the direction, I think those are things that are equally as important. But Nancy, I appreciate the time, the work that you do. I hope folks will take a look at your piece, Business Terms Used to Privatize Public Schools, over at nancybailey.com. We'll get links out on how folks can get there. Nancy, thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a great night. Again, this is just one of those amazing things. But make sure you check out that. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1859. That was the day John Brown was hanged in Charlestown, Virginia, in what is now West Virginia. He had been sentenced to death on charges of treason, murder, and insurrection for his role in the raid on the United States Federal Armory at Harper's Ferry. Brown and 21 abolitionists intended to seize the arsenal there, then build a free settlement in the Appalachian Mountains. From there, abolitionists and free people of color would wage a guerrilla war against the slave labor system throughout the South. Convicted on November 2nd, Brown resisted plans for rescue and prepared to die a martyr. And on this day, John Brown wrote his last statement. I, John Brown, am now quite certain that the crimes of this guilty land will never be purged away but with blood. I had, as I now think, vainly flattered myself that without very much bloodshed, it might be done. He was marched out of the Jefferson County Jail through a crowd of onlookers that included Stonewall Jackson and John Wilkes Booth to the gallows where he was hanged. While many abolitionists distanced themselves from his actions, they defended him and memorialized him after his death. Frederick Douglass remarked many years later, his zeal in the cause of my race was far greater than mine. It was as the burning sun to my taper light. Mine was bounded by time. His stretched away to the boundless shores of eternity. I could live for the slave, but he could die for him.
Oh, John Brown's body lies molding in the grave, while weep the sons of bondage whom he ventured out to save. And though he lost his life in his struggle to free the slaves, his truth is marching on.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
John Brown's body lies molding in the grave.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I think about the terms that she pointed out, and one of my other least favorite is synergy. I hate that word, because what that usually means is that you're going to end up doing more work. Less people are going to be doing that job, and we need to reduce redundancy. Another one of those words that they love to use when they're going to fire people and make someone do twice as much work for the same or less pay. Yeah, those are a couple of my least favorite words. That means corporate America is going to get richer and richer, and you're going to work harder for less. But the education thing is weird to me because I go back to this accountability thing. I can't imagine my mother blaming the teacher for me getting a bad grade. Yet I have heard parents say, well, little Johnny didn't learn anything because that teacher was terrible. I could never imagine those words coming out of my mother's mouth. If I came home with a bad grade, I knew, and I used to, you come home with that report card with a B on it. Because I was a really good student early on. Didn't do so well in the high school years, but early on, when the beatings were probable, you'd come home with that and go, is this okay? And never once did she blame the teacher for, me getting a B or the one time I got a C. It was my fault. The accountability was on my end. And part of what this choice thing I think has done is kind of flip that dynamic a little bit where now education is not your responsibility to get as much out of it as you possibly can, but it's the school and the teacher's responsibility to force as much of it onto you. It's a weird dynamic change for me. And I think it's society, as a matter of society, we all have started to view ourselves in every vein as some kind of customer entitled to something. And it's something, I have, up until she said that, up until she was talking, I hadn't really thought that before. But it is kind of interesting to me how that dynamic shift has happened. Because, look, I have heard people say, well, my kid didn't learn as much because that was a bad teacher. I've never had a bad teacher. I've had some teachers I've hated because they were miserable to me. But they were never, they presented the information. I've had some really inspiring teachers. I've had some less so. Sister Mary St. Leo, if I could find where they've buried her, if she's hopefully passed. I know, a horrible thing to say. But I wouldn't say she was a bad teacher. I just think she was horrible to me. And it was, as in looking back on it, it's one of those things where you go, she probably thought she was doing the right thing by making me miserable. If he gets more practice reading out loud, because I had a really hard time reading out loud. I had a really hard time of standing up in front of the classroom and reading out loud. And it made, you knew when the biggest paragraph was coming around that was going to be mine. And I would stutter and I would stammer over it, and I wouldn't breathe at the right spots, and I sounded like an idiot. And the kids used to mock me just terribly. And I think in her world, she thought, the more he does it, the more practice he gets, the better he's going to get at it. And all it made me do is hate reading. In fact, I still do not. My wife can sit and read for hours and hours and hours, nonsense, ridiculous books of some kind of just, who knows what the hell fantasy world it's in. And she's giggling and laughing and happy, and she's into the story. I've never done that. I've never gotten into a book where I read for information. I read, okay, I got to read this, and this is what it is. I've never done that. And I blame that particular teacher for that part of it. It's not that she didn't teach me how to read. It's not that she didn't try, but she put me in a situation that I hated. But ultimately, I got to think, and I hope that it was out of, hey, we're going to help him. We're going to help him through this. So I would, if I had to choose a bad one, it would be her. But, I learned everything else. I did really great in other classes and other subjects with her. It was just that one thing. And the question I keep coming back to is, when does that dynamic shift? Because with my kids, I don't blame the teachers if they get bad grades. It's their fault. They didn't do their homework. They're the ones who have fallen behind. It's not the teacher's job to hold their hands. It's their job to do what's in front of them. And you'll never hear me say it's the teacher's fault. I tell my kids, if you don't understand it, ask. If you don't ask, it's your fault. And for me, I think as a society, not just on the education front, but this entitlement stuff at some point has to stop. In every vein in life. When I was a kid, not everybody played on the basketball team. We cut people. Not everyone made the team. Not everyone got a trophy. And this isn't one of those, participation rant things. But it kind of is. I know, every child's special. I get that. But not every kid's going to be a brain surgeon, and nor should they be. We need kids to do other things. And I think that's okay. Very, very bizarre times. But if you want to check out Nancy's piece, it's got some interesting buzzwords in it. She did miss synergy, though. Business terms used to privatize schools over at nancybailey.com. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Bob Ney is going to be here to share some thoughts on, some more election stuff. Right back after this. Stick around.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
The Army Corps of Engineers has denied a permit to the Pebble Mine, a controversial project in a remote part of Alaska that could have contaminated the world's largest salmon fishery.
Trump administration denies controversial Pebble Mine in Alaska.
Good.
But Trump EPA also lets polluting industries off the hook for toxic waste, while his Interior Department finalizes bird killing rule.
Not as good.
Plus, Bank of America ditches fossil fuel projects in the fragile Arctic.
All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Trump thinks that if he sells off enough of America, there won't be anything left for Joe Biden to be president of. Here's the key, Joe. You've got the White House, you've got this sidewalk, and everything else belongs to Exxon.
Oh, like it doesn't already. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, Donald Trump did something good, did one thing good before leaving office, nixing the Pebble Mine up in Alaska.
Know. It's a pretty big deal.
Yes, it is.
But we'll have more on that in a moment.
I look forward to it.
First, in Australia, an early spring heat wave down under is an ominous warning of the upcoming bushfire season in the wake of last year's record deadly bushfires intensified by record-breaking heat waves. Over the weekend, parts of Australia, including Sydney, sweltered through the hottest November night ever recorded, with daytime records in New South Wales hitting 115 degrees in spring. It's also the official end of the historic 2020 Atlantic hurricane season, which delivered a record-shattering 30 named tropical storms, forcing forecasters to dig into the Greek alphabet for storm names after running out of English names, all of it fueled by extremely warm ocean waters caused by man-made climate change.
Does the climate know that the hurricane season is over?
No, it does not. More storms could still form, so nobody should relax just yet.
Oh, thank God.
The Trump administration is racing to finish rollbacks of key environmental protections before they get shoved out the door, like finalizing the weakening of the Migratory Bird Treaty Act so that companies will no longer be held accountable for causing accidental deaths to migratory birds. The Fish and Wildlife Service admits that companies will be less likely to take steps to prevent harm to birds if they face no legal liability for it. That will lead to more bird deaths. The rule primarily benefits the oil industry, which kills exponentially more birds than wind farms.
Remember when Donald Trump would go out to all his rallies and pretend to be all sad about birds that were killed by wind farms?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was cute.
The public has only 30 days to comment on this rule.
I'm against it.
At regulations.gov.
Oh.
And the Trump Environmental Protection Agency says it will no longer require oil and gas, coal, chemical, and mining companies to purchase insurance to cover their major spills and accidents. Critics say the finalized rule will add to the growing list of toxic Superfund sites, forcing taxpayers to foot the bill for cleanup, and that it also poses the greatest risk to communities of color and low-income communities that are most likely to live next to polluting industries.
How hard will it be for the Biden administration to turn back finalized rules?
Finalized rules can take a very long time to turn back, but that's unless Democrats win control of the U.S. Senate in the 2 Georgia runoff elections on January 5th, under a law that allows Congress to repeal last-minute administration rules.
But they would have to have the majority in both the House and Senate to be able to do that.
Yes, that's correct.
You hear that, Georgia?
Some good news. On Monday, Bank of America announced it will stop providing project financing for oil and gas exploration in the fragile Arctic as well. With B of A's announcement, all of the big 6 banks in the United States have now all ruled out funding for drilling in the Arctic. But the bad news is the Trump administration has proposed a new rule that would force banks to finance fossil fuel projects.
Yeah, good luck with that. They're in there for another 50 days. They do not have time to finalize any such rules like that.
The rule would literally bar financial institutions from refusing to lend to the fossil fuel industry.
Whatever. Goodbye.
The Hill reports that Trump's new proposal is divisive among conservatives because it pits advocates for fossil fuels at any cost against so-called free market advocates who call it government overreach to tell banks where to invest.
Oh, now they're concerned about government overreach.
Finally, there is one really good thing that Trump has done on his way out. After a 15-year contentious battle with Native American tribes and conservation organizations, the Army Corps of Engineers denied a crucial permit for Alaska's controversial Pebble Mine, calling it, quote, contrary to the public interest under the Clean Water Act. The massive proposed gold and copper mine would have decimated one of the world's most prolific wild salmon fisheries in Bristol Bay, Alaska, which brings in billions in revenue. The denial follows recent opposition from Donald Trump Jr. and other key conservatives who pressed Trump to reject it.
Good. We'll take it. Thank you, Donald Trump. Now beat it. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So a little more election fun. Alabama Congressman Mo Brooks says he plans on challenging the Electoral College votes when Congress officially certifies the victory for Joe Biden. I got to wonder how many other Republicans are going to join along, or will join along, or will Mo be standing alone? Maybe Jack and Manny will show up too. Maybe Manny, Mo, and Jack will be the three that. That's Pep Boys. Never mind. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the idiocy of the election that we see going on. I've asked our good friend Bob Ney to come back and talk with us. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thank you, Rick.
So Mo Brooks says he's going to officially challenge the Electoral College votes. What's that mean?
Well, it actually happened to me, by the way, so I can speak with authority on this. It's happened, if I am correct in my memory, twice in modern American history, and once when I actually called Ohio. And back of me was Vice President of the United States Cheney. John Larson was the ranking member of House Administration Committee. He was the co-chair with me of the House, electoral receiving. And then we had two other, I can't remember, on each side of the aisle with us. Anyway, when I called Ohio because Cheney had to leave the floor, Congresswoman Stephanie Tubbs Jones challenged it. Now, I knew she was going to. She told me, she was going to do it. And she challenged it, and then we, defeated the challenge. So it's going to happen. If my memory serves me right, Rick, Stephanie Tubbs, of course, she did it just as a matter of to make a statement, on Bush, 2004, by the way. But my memory serves me right. The vote was very small, on it. We had opposed it in a bipartisan block. That's what will happen if Mo Brooks will probably do it. That's what will happen.
How many people?
They're not going to have traction.
Do you think many will come along? Because I'm looking at what this guy from Georgia said, like the voting information manager or whatever his title was, saying, look, this has got to stop. He's getting death threats. And I, like I said at the beginning, I can't imagine what the woman here in Pennsylvania is getting, Kathy Bachvar. What kind of insanity being thrown her way. At some point, this just doesn't make this any better, does it?
Well, no, it stops. December the 8th is the beginning, the end of this. That's when the electors do their business. Then the 14th is transmitted to the floor of the House. Then the House officially votes in January. But frankly, when that comes December the 14th, because again, I was one of the tellers. I've been through this process. Once the people sitting up front at the dais, and by the way, this time, ironically, in back of the members of the House and the Senate is going to be Vice President Mike Pence, who's going to be part of the process of certifying it. Okay, once that happens, December 14th, it's done. Then it officially transmits to the floor of the House and is voted on in January. So December 14th is the big day.
Right.
If anything was going to happen, those members of the Congress that are down front there with the VP in back of them, that's when something could go wrong. That is the date. Otherwise, it's done.
Do you see anything? Do you see that happening?
No. And here, look. Here's what's going on. If today, and more members of Congress, especially the 14th, are going to be asked about this. A lot of people on the Republican side, not all of them, but a lot of people are keeping their powder dry. They don't want to get Trump irritated, et cetera. Now, Senator from Wisconsin, Johnson,
right.
He made a statement today that just blew my mind. Here was his statement when asked about, this election, and Bill Barr, because the Attorney General said, et tu, Brute, it's done, right? Bill Barr. So Johnson's response was, well, he wanted Bill Barr to prove to him not if there was fraud, but why there isn't fraud. He seriously said that today. Okay? Now, here would be my answer if I got in a box. The president has every legal right to do what he wants to do, but Joe Biden is the president-elect. I mean, I think that's a pretty easy answer. Some people just are avoiding it. So they're letting this whole process go, when in reality they should just make a simple statement, it's done. That's what they should say.
Yeah.
So Mo Brooks will have no traction to speak of.
I mean, because I look at someone like Johnson, and Johnson at one point seemed somewhat reasonable. Over the last couple of years, not so much. I mean, he whatever punch Trump's throwing around, he must be guzzling it by the gallon.
Right. He comes from an interesting state, as you know, with Wisconsin and directions it can go. And Johnson, I would say, because I follow him, I do Wisconsin radio, so I follow him, and it's just gotten kind of a little bit crazier month by month. But his statement today was, to the Attorney General again, well, I want him to show me the facts of why there wasn't fraud. Well, how did he come to that conclusion? Well, he came to that conclusion because there wasn't fraud.
There was no fraud.
There were some irregularities, which we all know.
Right.
That happens, but not fraud and nothing that would have overturned any elections.
It's amazing. This whole thing's just been quite amusing on a certain level, and hopefully on the other side of it, we wake up from this nightmare and move somewhat in the other direction. Now, Trump isn't the only one contesting elections. I don't know if you saw this story coming out of Iowa. And this is one of those amazing stories where a congressional district in Iowa had an open seat has been decided by 6 votes.
Wow.
And this Rita Hart, she was a state senator there. Evidently she's giving up the legal battle, and instead they're going to contest the election to the House Administration Committee, because the Iowa election officials certified it for the Republican, and 6 votes. It was originally 47. They did a recount. It's down to 6 votes. But by taking it to the House Administration Committee, what exactly how exactly can she win this?
Okay. Everything you're bringing up tonight, I've lived the real life example. You, of course, know Loretta Sanchez, who was a member of Congress.
Right.
And she defeated B-Bomber Bob Dornan. Remember years ago in California, they called him B1 Bob or something.
Right.
She defeated Dornan. And we had a request based on non-citizens voting to have a hearing on it. So I agreed with the motion, and then we had Steny Hoyer, who was the ranking member. He's now number 2, in the Democratic Congress, next to Pelosi, and Vern Ehlers, a congressman from Michigan, because Republicans controlled the House administration. So we had 2-1, and right away we were attacked that we were overturning an election, and we weren't. We told both Dornan and Sanchez, don't talk to us. We're going to hold the hearing. So we came up with 750 people who were not citizens that voted in that election. Our final decision was to not overturn the election. That was our final decision. But the fact that it even got to where it got created a stir of controversy. So the bottom line of House administration is, if the committee which we deemed at that time, and that was one of the only races that's ever happened in those 2 or 3 year period. But Rick, to answer your question, House administration can then hold an official hearing if the House Administration Committee decides that there was something extremely irregular, and they're actually able to go in, as we were, and literally get boxes of election material and have it analyzed and went through by the lawyers, Democrat and Republican. They could then vote on that panel, that 3-person panel. They could vote to then take it to the floor of the House and actually overturn the election. They could.
So with the Democrats having the control of the House, this is probably a better route to go than to actually go through the courts, then, if I'm hearing you right.
Yes, I would say it would be if they have something, to base on. Rita Hart has not conceded, and she can challenge it in court, but if they're successful in throwing it to House administration, well, basically good luck on the court.
Wow.
Because House administration would then, if they found, the ability to do it, and with 6 votes, look, we found 750 votes that would not be counted, but the vote difference that didn't make a difference, so, I made the motion to not overturn the election. But the House Administration Committee has the power to do that.
Well,
so, yes,
can
they
you
very
imagine?
well could.
Can you imagine how Trump's head would explode?
Of course he would.
Because
this is another way of the process, and people say, well, that's just not fair. Well, it's the way the House has been set up, forever.
Yeah, but that's too nuanced.
Well, and they don't take it lightly. This isn't something done all the time. We had so much evidence brought to us that we felt there should be a hearing, and I made it very crystal clear at that time that we are not predetermined to overturn this election, but we definitely needed to, to air it out. There was no question about it, and we did, and we didn't overturn the election.
So how long does
yes, it could.
How long do you think that process takes? Because this is one of those things. I now got to look at Iowa's second district forever now until I get a resolution on this. How long does this usually take?
Well, with us, we had to. I'm trying to go back in my memory here, but I believe it took us every bit of 3 months.
Wow.
I think.
So in that time period, does the person who Iowa has certified as the winner sit in that seat?
No. What happens? Well, Iowa certifies the winner if they decide not to seat. The House can decide not to seat.
Okay.
And they can do that. You know who they tried to not seat was the current Congressman Alcee Hastings of Florida. The House tried to not seat him at one point in time, and he got seated, But if the House decides not to seat them, and the House has an official hearing, then the clerk of the House runs the office, and House Administration Chairman. They run the office. Every time a vacancy occurred when I was chair of House Administration, Democrat or Republican, the clerk and I ran the office. That's how it happens.
All right, interesting.
Also, there's a whole House internal process out there.
Yeah, no, I'm anxiously now. I'm looking to Iowa, second congressional district, to see how this plays out, and I can't wait to see if some. I can't imagine what the calls would be if they did overturn it, especially today when the big news is Michael Flynn, who retweeted a tweet calling for martial law and a demand that we rerun the November presidential election. And in fact, I guess the tweet came from an Ohio nonprofit by the name of We the People Convention, which I guess is one of the ones who tweeted this out. So what do you think? Martial law, rerun the election?
I mean, to me, I guess this is what you say when you're pardoned. Now let's see. If I got a pardon, what would I have to say? I don't know.
Oh, so you're saying there was a quid pro quo here? Okay, I'm getting that.
What do you think? Somebody whispered in his ear, you ought to say this,
Since you brought up the pardons, how much of that you think is going on? Because there was a story yesterday that there could be some bribery going on to get some pardons, and even Billy Barr's not too thrilled with what's going on either.
Right. Well, I don't believe that anybody in the White House right now, staff, are targets. I do think the lobby community, there are targets in the lobby community, because every time these pardons come up, somebody within the lobby community is, and it's happened historically with these pardons. If it's a big name, somebody has went to a relative and said, hey, we can represent you for $200,000, try to get you a pardon. And I think that's what they're going to take a look at.
Yeah.
I believe it's going to center around the lobby community.
All right, so it's not Trump out there trying to get a little bit of money then.
No, he's going to do Trump TV and the Saudis. They're going to buy the Trump Mideast Bureau for a fire sale of $50 million. Yeah.
Do they need to? I mean, you look at all the fundraising he's doing off of
$172 million.
Yeah, is that enough? Isn't that well? I guess if he's going to get to $1 billion, he's still got $800 million to go.
Well, yes, people have to realize that the federal election law is very, very broad. It's a broad brush, and it says you can use the money for the furtherance of your political career. If I left Congress and I had a campaign account, and somebody in Pennsylvania said, why don't you just come up and we'll arrange a dinner and a speech and things, I can rent a car, I can rent a driver, I can fly up, I can use my campaign account to do any of that because it furthers my political career. I can take everybody to dinner.
Right. So the second he starts talking about potentially running in 2024, he can spend that money.
He can spend it. He can collect it. He can use it. And then it would be a mixture, because if he's doing Trump TV and he's out there doing an event and he turns that event of 5,000 or 6,000 people into a fundraiser of, donate whatever you want, $3 times how many people are there, or $10, whatever. Then, even though it's Trump TV, a private corporation, he would be having an event where he would raise money, which would go into his campaign account to, quote, further his political career.
Wow.
He can hire consultants. He can do TV ads. I mean, that is a big open Mack truck for people who are leaving public office. It used to be they would pay taxes and keep it. That got changed in 1994.
Wow. So we're not getting rid of him anytime soon, is what you're telling me.
Well, I think
there's money to be had.
I think for the, a Republican called me 10 minutes ago before getting on your show here, a Republican from Florida, and he said, when is Trump, going to go away and concede this thing? And I said, well, that's not the issue. The issue is, where's he going to be the next 4 years? And, if candidates come out, Nikki Haley, we can get down the ladder on this. If they come out, is he going to go after them and use Trump television to go after? Is he going to go down and mess with the Georgia races, Senate races? I mean, he could be around in a thorn in the side of not Joe Biden, but the Republicans.
Oh, it's going to be interesting to see where this goes, because you've just opened up a whole new world of possibilities of insanity.
Right, exactly.
Oh, let the fun begin. And finally, evidently Trump has threatened to veto the Defense Authorization Act because, well, he's not happy with what they're doing with social media. I mean, how's that got to do with defense?
It's a rider, and of course, riders are in bills. Speaker Hasser at one time probably was the one person who kind of stopped a lot of the riders for a while, and the riders are the add-ons. Now, normally in a bill, you've got a rider, and it's not looked at as that bad, no matter what the content is. But on this one, Rick, it's a defense bill, and all of a sudden there's a rider in that he wants in there, that the president does, where the tech companies lose their liability, third-party liability. If I would go on Facebook and say something, they could sue Zuckerberg. So that's kind of a weird demand that he's going to actually veto the military operations bill, our defense bill, the funding for our military, their pay, et cetera. He's going to do it because, he wants to go back at big tech.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this,
I just can't imagine this.
Because, I'm thinking about this now that, because he's been talking about this 230 for a while.
Right.
this Section 230 of the Communication Decency Act, where, as you said, if you did away with this, you could sue Zuckerberg. Wouldn't this be a way to stop the insanity on social media? That virtually nothing mean will ever be said again, because these platforms aren't going to allow it to happen. So maybe by taking this away, don't we end him?
Well, I guess we would end Twitter. I mean, because Twitter would, look at things that President Trump said. Definitely, if we look at the history of his tweets, and would, take a lot of them down and eventually probably ban him because of their liability.
Yeah, I mean, because I'm looking at this and I'm going, there's part of me that goes, I don't necessarily think it's a bad idea to get rid of it, because there's some really vile things being said, and maybe this is a way you tap some of this down so that there's no just plain immunity for people. But I don't understand why he would want it, because he says a lot of this vile stuff that would certainly be chucked out.
Well, right now I think he's just mad at he's mad at computer companies, he's mad at big tech.
Yeah.
He's angry at a lot of people. He's firing people, he's doing this and that, and so this is just sort of a stab at him. I think in his mind, though, Rick, he probably believes that enough people on the right and the left are mad at these big media tech companies that they'll go after this. But this isn't the way to do it. I mean, this is an issue that, and I agree with you, I think it ought to be looked at. I think there's some things they can do, but just to remove the entire section won't work. This is one of these things they really need to take a good, hard look at it and craft something, that would be workable. And it's not going to be just in that piece of legislation.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how it goes. But, Bob, I appreciate the time, as always. Good stuff, my friend.
Thank you, Rick.
Our good friend Bob Ney, former congressman, political analyst. I just, I look at this and go, at some point, I'm hoping Twitter does ban him completely. But we'll see. But if they did do away with that, I'm looking at my Twitter feed right now going, I can go down this and we could just start ticking people off right away. Because there's, on my feed, I don't know about other people's, there's some pretty vile stuff, and some pretty hate-filled kind of stuff. So I don't know. It's interesting times. Now there's going to be a big Christmas party, evidently. We have a Secretary of State who I guess has decided that we need to have a big party. We need to have 800 people show up to a Christmas party, in the middle of a global pandemic, and I'm sure none of them will be able to social distance and do all that stuff. And our Trump's spokesperson, Kayleigh McEnany, evidently believed that if her statement on being asked the question, because evidently the White House plans on holding numerous parties for the holiday season. She says, if you can loot businesses, burn down buildings, engage in protest, you can also go to a Christmas party. You can celebrate the holiday of Christmas, and you can do it responsibly. And while I agree you can do it responsibly, I don't know how you do that with 800 people in a room. Again, where we started today, I don't know how you have a hearing in a room with hundreds of people without wearing masks, and then are surprised when the guy at the head of it is tested having COVID, Senator Mastriano, and then say, oh, well, it was a mistake, and we have to go back and review it. No, it wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't, oops. No, you did this on purpose. You made a clear, conscious choice to put people's lives in danger. And the fact that you don't care about your own life speaks volumes about what you'll think about others. Which is why, again, remember this day when Senator Doug Mastriano runs for governor of Pennsylvania in 2022. And remember this decision that he made to not only put himself in harm's way, since clearly he doesn't care about himself, but all of those hundreds of other people that his faithful, his flock, the people who follow that leader, he was willing to put them in danger. And we've got a White House who does the same thing. And finally, under the do as I say, not as I do, the mayor of Austin, Texas is being ridiculed, mocked, harassed. Evidently, the Austin mayor, Steve Adler, hosted a wedding outdoors and a reception for 20 guests for his daughter's wedding downtown Austin, and then got aboard a private jet and flew to Cabo, for their vacation at the timeshare, all the while telling people to stay home. Hypocrisy. Love it. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you're going. As always, you can email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. And please, until we're back again, stay safe, stay away from each other, put that little thing over your face, and please don't sneeze on me. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com.